Yeah.
As a youngster, I was called Bert as well. What I'd like to give you, if you want to ask a question while I'm talking, please interrupt, because your questions are going to tell me what you really want to know. But for my start, I'd like to tell you that I was born in Australia. After a period of service in the Air Force in Australia, I eventually came to England and I stayed here for 6 years, working for a company named Rank Xerox.
Oh, yeah.
During that period,
Rank Zero.
while I was here, I joined the Royal Air Force Volunteer Reserve, was commissioned, and I enjoyed that very much, because it seemed to me, there's probably a lot of servicemen have seen before, there's quite a difference in the services between Australia and Britain. Different attitudes, different way of doing things, but it's something I enjoyed very much. Anyway, after going back to Australia, it took a number of years before I decided to get onto the bandwagon of travelling. And I did quite a bit of travelling and found that doing a 12-month tour of Europe was extremely beneficial. It gave myself and my wife an understanding of the world that we hadn't seen before. But on the return trip, we stopped in Malaysia. We stopped at Kuala Lumpur. Now, Kuala Lumpur today is different to the Kuala Lumpur that some of you may have seen 20, 30 years ago. It's built up, it has a lot of industry in Kuala Lumpur as well as accommodation and everything. Very, very large city. But it's very hot, very, very moist and very noisy. So looking at that, we thought, my wife and I said, let's try and see what's outside Kuala Lumpur. So we did. We went down to a small village called Port Dickson, which is right on the coast, around about 45 kilometres south of the KL International Airport. And we liked it so much that we thought that, hey, maybe we might spend a bit of time here. So we arranged for a 3-month rental of an accommodation in Port Dickson, and immediately went home to Australia, packed our next sort of bags and returned back within a month. And then we stayed there for 3 months, and after that 3 months we said, not a bad place. Why don't we stay another 2 months? So we did. Then it really, by that time, had got to us. We looked at the situation of why we were living in Australia. We looked at the situation of where would we want to retire. And I must tell you, at that point, when we were making that decision, I'd already retired 3 times. And the trouble is, maybe what's happening to you guys too, you can't sit there and watch the grass grow. It just becomes too much of a burden. So I said, okay, this was back in Australia. I retired once, then got into a job in Australia, retired from that, another job. Then I'm over in Malaysia now, and I thought, here I am in Malaysia. What do I like about it? The very first thing that every one of you would very much be appreciative of, I only pay RM1.80 for a litre of petrol. Now that doesn't mean much right at this minute, but until I tell you that 5.5 ringgits will equal 1 English pound.
Good go.
Now, I've got your attention? Yep, one RM1.80 for 1 litre of petrol, and the price is regulated by the government. The government gives a subsidy to ensure that all the citizens have the availability of transport. They have diesel there too, but they're not too favoured on diesel. And as far as LPG, they just don't have it. They have NGV, which is a natural compressed gas. But that's confined mostly to Kuala Lumpur, not for the rest of the country. And they should really take it right out in the other parts of the country.
PNG.
No, sorry.
MPG.
Yeah.
Oh, I see.
Natural gas for running motor vehicles on.
Yeah.
But all the taxi cabs have the NGV part. Anyway, coming back to the other part of the thing that really got us was that we found that not only was the petrol cheaper, which is just a good start, we found that my wife does not cook now. If you go home and you tell your wives this, I can tell you, you're going to get GBH on the ear roll. It's her indoors, as I heard from Arthur, they don't like the cooking part of it. No, my wife and I eat out almost every night. We go down to local restaurants, and there's quite a few. In fact, in our region, I could estimate about 100, 150 I could go to any night. They're so close, packed side by side. You thank your luck, which sometimes when you walk into some of them, but it still has been very good. We haven't had any of that barley belly that people speak about when they go to Thailand. I haven't had any of that problem with the Malaysian cooking. Now you've got 3 types of cooking that you've got to look for. There's Malaysian cooking, Chinese cooking, and Indian cooking. And I'm sorry. I am very sorry, but I find the Indian cooking a little bit hard to get into. It's very spicy, very hot.
You have to like the spicy. You have to like the spicy before.
Yes, it is great. I like the spice, but
Good God.
Sorry, it's not working. I think they want you to speak a bit louder as well.
oh, sorry, yes.
Really,
Lift it a
throw
bit
your
louder.
voice up.
I'll try a bit louder.
Thank you.
Anyway, the point with the cooking is that it costs us per person per night approximately, and I'll come into pounds, shillings and pence, around about £1 per person per night to eat out.
Cool.
You like that? Now, would your wife go home and cook if you're only going to, it's only going to cost you £1 a night? I know what mine says to me. So anyway, we've got to the stage now where we don't actually eat in the restaurants. We just go there and get takeaway, come home to the apartment, and then we sort it out the best way we can, watch the television, or whatever we want to do while we're having our dinner. Now that's just one of the, or 2 of the factors that have really come down to making us feel that we want to be in Malaysia. Financial. The 3rd part of the financial is, where do you live? Now that's the hard one. You've got to actually make a choice yourself on where you want to be if you were in Malaysia. And us looking at Port Dickson, saying that I'm right on the ocean. I actually look out over the ocean every night and I watch the sun set into the sea. But bear in mind, we're 2 to 3 degrees above the equator. Now that means that the sun has to travel from the south up to the north and then back again in 1 year. So I see the sun setting in various degrees. I don't see it setting in one place every night. But I get beautiful pictures on the sky every night with this sunset, and it's magnificent. Now, the place of where we live in a large apartment block, and in the complete block there's about 600 units. Not unusual in Malaysia. That's quite the norm. You don't get many bungalows, you don't get many side-by-side housing like Coronation Street. They do have some, but not a lot. This apartment that we actually bought while we were there is 3 bedrooms, marble floor in all the living areas, teak parquetry in the bedrooms, 2 bathrooms. That's one ensuite, 1 main bathroom, and a large living area with a balcony and a kitchen. A kitchen that it's got cobwebs in it, you know. But the living area looks out over the ocean. Now we're on the 7th floor, and because on the 7th floor we get those views, but every day and night we get cool sea breezes coming in from the ocean, running right through the apartment. At night time, the reverse flow occurs. Air going from the inlands out to the ocean, and it's still cool. So we get 30-degree temperature almost every day, 365 days of the year. It's a hard life, someone's got to do it. Now the decision to make us do that took us probably 6 months to be absolutely certain that we were going to do that. Some people would if they make that decision, could take them shorter, some people longer. But for me, that didn't take too much of a decision. My only problem was ensuring that my wife was going to be happy there. And now she's here in Lightwater over in Surrey, waiting for me to come home, and I'll get home there and she will say, "Isn't it cold today?" Because your weather right now today is the same temperature that we would experience in wintertime in Australia. This is winter. I'm sorry, I don't know where the summer's gone.
It's still coming.
Oh, yes, right. Must remember, I was here for 6 years and it was like this. 1974, I got back to Australia from England, and I landed at Mascot Airport in Sydney, and I walked outside and I just stood and I looked and I just said, "Look at all that blue sky." I couldn't believe that was 1974, so it was lovely then.
Yeah.
Global warming, yes. Funny you should mention that, because when we first went to Malaysia, there was one of the issues of global warming occurring in a neighbouring country, namely Indonesia. They were burning off so much of their forests that there was an enormous pall of smoke rising out of Indonesia, and with the current airflow in the upper levels of the atmosphere, it was catching it and funneling it sideways and blotting out the sun in Malaysia, for a great part of Malaysia. Now Malaysia got together with a few other countries and gave Indonesia a bit of a tap on the shoulder, and Indonesia has now ceased doing the burning off of the forest. And why not? They shouldn't have done it in the first place, but they did. Now, the other part that occurs to me that us men don't seem to get involved in supermarkets and getting the weekly shopping and all that sort of stuff, but unfortunately I've got to be involved in that. And we found that overall the living costs per week, per month, per year run out of about 25% of what we spend in England. And that's an overall cost. We actually are saving more money while we're in Malaysia than we are in any other part of the world. We still have a house in Australia on the Gold Coast. One of our people have been there, and I'll let Colin tell you all about the Gold Coast later on. Asked him about it. Anyway, our house is 4 bedrooms. It's got a double garage, and it's in quite a good area. It's on a 850 square metre block of ground, which is about 8 kilometres from the ocean. And I can, from my veranda, look out to sea. And I have forsaken that to take up residence in Malaysia, because I find I'm so much better off. Much, much better. Now, gentlemen, rather than going any further and boring you, would you have any questions at all?
Yeah, an obvious one as you get older, I think, is the question about medical facilities and that sort of thing in Malaysia. How do you find that?
They tell me they are on a par with Australia. I do not doubt that for a moment. I've only had contact with local doctors, and I find they are right down to earth. They're not this argy-bargy, you've got to, oh, I can't diagnose that, go off to a specialist. They deal with it on the ground, right there in the spot. And every time, my doctor has been spot on with everything. Above his premises, his wife has a dental practice, and my wife won't go to anyone else. And she needed some crowns done on her teeth. She'd already had a price in Australia, and she paid 1/3 of what the price was in Australia. As in Port Dickson, we are actually about 1 kilometre away from a major hospital. And it's, for us, we've driven in there, but we haven't had to go there. But if I do, I know that the staff there, from what I've spoken to the locals, they are working quite well as medical professionals.
Is this a pay-for system? It's,
Say again?
It's not. You have to pay for the medical facility. It's not.
If you go and see a doctor in the hospital, it costs you an awful lot.
Right.
One ringgit. And that's not an exaggeration. That's what
5 of those.
locals. Sorry?
How many's the pound of it?
5.5.
You listen, you doctor.
Yeah, you doctor. Yeah.
But you can see the difference in values there. It's a lot different. The society is totally different to the English society. It is a multiracial society made up of 3 major races. The Malay race, which is the predominant race. The second one is the Chinese, and the third one is the Indian. Now the Indian would encompass Pakistani and all other people from around the Indian nationality, nation. But they intermix so well. There is I haven't found any racial prejudice whatever in Malaysia.
What was the political situation like now? Well, when I was there was great preference to the sons of the soil, the Bumiputra.
Still,
Is it still the same?
yes,
You know,
because
to the disadvantage of the Indian and Chinese.
of course,
It's a tremendous
but
crowd.
there is a brand new Prime Minister there.
Right.
Now, when I say brand new, I'm going to stand back and I'm going to wait to see what he comes up with. But he has made a statement as early as January this year that he wants to treat everyone the same in Malaysia. Now, he hasn't specifically said he's going to reduce all the benefits that the Bahasa, the Malay people get, but the Malay people get a lot of benefits. Tremendous. If you, let's say, you were to do a development, you make 300 houses, build 300 houses, 10% of that has to be put aside, low cost, for the Malay people. If the Malay people don't take it up, they just left there. They don't, nobody goes and lives in them. There are areas where other races, meaning English, Chinese or Indian, cannot live because that's classified as a booming area. B-U-R-M-I, a booming area where the Malay people only can live. But in the general run of things, the government is very stable indeed. They don't seem to make good decisions all the time, but I think I've seen a few of that locally in the last couple of weeks.
Read our papers.
Yep. So, but all in all, we don't have any problems.
You don't tend to feel that socially, I guess, but it's quite difficult in business, I know.
It is. But now the government has actually made some major steps as of this new Prime Minister.
Good to hear.
The Malaysia My Second Home program, where people from other countries can come and live in Malaysia. You can go there and apply for that, and you can get a 10-year visa. Currently, as of, and it was February that it came out, the people who are over 50 who apply for that program are allowed to either work 20 hours a week or they can start their own business. And then they can work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Make whatever money they want, pay the taxation that they want, but up until February this year they couldn't do that. But now you can actually do that. There are some other regulations that do come into that Malaysia My Second Home program, but it's not frightening. They are definitely looking at getting overseas funds into Malaysia and building up their strength financially. Sorry?
I'm saying that that's the wish of every country nowadays in that part, you know,
Very
where
much.
as much dollars and sterling you can.
Well, the Malaysian government has been doing this for probably 8 or 10 years, looking to bring people into Malaysia to live. And right now, I think they've got a pattern that just might start to work for them, because they've allowed the retirees that come into Malaysia to be able to work, be able to utilise their brain power to make businesses and make them flourish.
What about crime? I mean, do you feel safe there? I mean,
Yep. I know what you mean with that.
yeah.
And I would walk almost anywhere except in Johor Bahru. Johor Bahru is down near the Singapore-Malaysian border, and it's full of Indonesians, any other race that can get into Johor Bahru, because there's a lot of industry down there, and they are a little bit prone to getting a bit violent, getting a bit muggings, and if you ride along on a push bike, they'll knock you off the push bike and take your bag. But in other parts of the country, very, very moderate crime, probably less than what you see in England. I know it's less than what I have known of in Australia.
What is the population of Malaysia?
27 million, approximately, give or take. You know, it depends on how many people get married. You know.
So can I just ask you, I've been to Kuala Lumpur city centre and I stayed there for a week. I don't know how far Port Dickson is where you live, but I found the place not that cheap as you were saying. I stayed at the Mandarin Oriental next to the Twin Towers.
Yes.
And we had breakfast. They went to sign papers, although it was included. And I saw two of us ended up a bill of 258 ringgit for the breakfast. And from there to the Jew, you would know how far that is. I paid 40 ringgit for the taxi.
Yes.
And when I went shopping, I didn't really find it that cheap as you were saying. And the other observation I made here, there are three lots of people. The Malay who are the ruling class, Chinese are the rich, although they're minor, not that as big as the Malay community, but they are richer people.
Yes.
And the Indians, it included the Indian proper, Pakistani, and Sri Lankans as well, quite a few. That's what I noticed. But I honestly can't remember as cheap as you are making it out. I did not feel it that way.
Okay, the area that you were staying in near the Twin Towers is actually called the Golden Triangle. And what, coming to the taxi drivers, most times when they see a European face or a face that they know is not far.
I look like an Indian.
They will tell you, as you get in the cab, where are you going is the first question you get. And if you don't tell them and you sit down in the seat and they say, where you go, where you go? And you say, Loyat Plaza. And I say, 15 ringgit. And if you know your onions in Malaysia, you say, you use the cab, you use the meter, or I'll ring the Ministry of Transport. And the meter goes on almost immediately and you'll pay 5 ringgits for that cab fare. The one that they took you for 40 ringgits, I would get probably...
Back to Australia.
Singapore.
Not quite. You're on the track. You know, I could get to the outskirts of Kuala Lumpur for a 40 ringgit cab fare. Now, I've had fights with taxi drivers. I don't step back from a good Barney. You know, let's get into it and make them do the right thing. And if you can't get an agreement with the taxi driver, just say go. And there's 5 seconds behind him. You don't have to take the first fare that comes along. They'll keep on pulling up as long as you put your hand up. And one of them's just going to hit the meter and off you go. And 5 ringgits later, you're where you want to be. If I go from the centre of Port Dickson, oh, you mentioned where Port Dickson was. Port Dickson is due south of Kuala Lumpur, and it's about 75 kilometres. As you go due south, you will go right through KLIA, the international airport. So, due south, right on the coast is where Port Dickson is. I went from Kuala Lumpur, when we were first there, by bus down to Port Dickson, and the cost was 7 ringgits. I had an argument with the girl in the booth there. I said, did you say 70 ringgits? No, I said 7. Do you mean 17? I couldn't get it, and I couldn't believe I was going to pay 7 ringgits, you know, just over £1 to go 75 kilometres by bus. That was the price. It's up a little bit now from when we were first there, but 7 ringgits to get to Port Dickson and 7 ringgits to come back. And it was a long trip, about 2 hours. You can't beat that. A train fare from Port Seremban, which is the end of the rail line for our area, into Kuala Lumpur and back again, cost 12 ringgits as a return fare. So it's not expensive. It's a matter of, as a tourist though, you will only see the expensive side of it. But as a local, you'll get into it and you'll find that, $1.80 for petrol.
What would be the average wage though, for the normal person working there?
As a Malay or a Chinese,
Well, I don't care which it is.
it changes.
He looks more Chinese.
A Malay person would probably earn around about between 400 and 1300 ringgits for a month. Now it depends on the job, of course.
It's 80 quid.
Yeah. You would pay a maid if you had an apartment there or a house and you had a maid. You would pay her between 450 and 550 ringgits for a month. If you a girl working in a shop, if she was looking after the shop and she was managing it all, she would probably get about 1300 ringgits for the month. Divide that by 5.5. You get an idea of where they are with the wage structure. As a European, you're negotiable. It's a matter of you figure out what you want and then talk to. And the best one to talk to are the Chinese. Quite honestly, they are the business people and they really work hard. They know what they want, they know how to get it, and they're not frightened to put out money if they want something. With the Malay, if you want to get a job done, you've got to pick up your diary and just say, what month are you going to be here? There is, and you can't be sure they're going to be there in that time. With the Indian population, they're very hard to get to. They don't. They are the best speakers of English too, by the way, much better than the Malay people. But the Indian people don't seem to have trades. They don't try to get involved in trade work. They usually work for shops as labourers and such like that in most cases. If you get a tradesperson, and let's assume first of all that tradesperson is going to be a Malay, you have to see his work before you even put him on the job. You've got to make sure, and don't ask him to do a job if you yourself don't know how to do it, because they will run rings out around you and they will do anything they want to do and count your stock every night. Now the major work in Malaysia is done by Indonesians. Indonesians come over and they can get a work permit quite easily, and I've had Indonesians work. I had 2 units there, two apartments, and I've had both apartments renovated just recently, meaning this year. And I had Indonesians working there, and I know the building business quite well. I'm not a problem with that. So I was able to see simple things. You put a band of tiles around the bathroom. You've got to watch which way they put them. If there's a up and a down, they'll put them down. They don't look at those sort of things. But you go in and you just check them and tell them what you want. They do it that way, and they do it well, and they'll work hard. So, is there any more questions?
Take a couple of questions. Okay. No.
Oh, yes, we do have one.
You say your apartment's on the 7th floor.
Yes.
What happens when the lift breaks down?
They've got a stairs. Now, look, you're right on the knock with that one. But now the building is run by a management organisation, and the idea is that you've got a size 8 boot or a size 10 boot. You use and make the management understand that if that lift breaks down, they are going to carry your stuff upstairs for you, or carry you down the stairs. That manager hates doing that, because I did it to him a few times.
The third part, the lift don't break, is the power cuts. We stop the lifts.
Oh, well, the powers, we have had some power cuts, but not many. Now, the lifts in our building, both have now been overhauled. We know that the lifts are now working quite well, but it has been a problem at times. But here again, I guess you can get that problem anywhere in the world. Okay.
Well, thank you very much.
Father, your pleasant duty.